Hey everyone, we are still with Paul before Agrippa. That's where we're still seeing him. He hasn't moved at all. So last week we saw that Festus had kind of a bit of a coward, had tried to get on Agrippa's good side. Agrippa was there with his wife Bernice. They were pretty dodgy people. They weren't holy and upright at all. And Agrippa wants to hear Paul speak, and so Paul does speak to him. Now I'm not going to read it because even though it's good to read, I did just read it a couple of weeks ago. Paul gives his testimony again. So Agrippa goes, "Kind of tell me about yourself." And Paul gives his testimony again. Again, he witnesses to who he was and what God has done in his life. He explains to Agrippa everything that is important, everything that is going on. And Agrippa says, yep, tell me about it. Paul tells him about it. And so Paul says his testimony, he says what's going on. And he says to Agrippa, and I'm going to read this bit for us because it's important to get the kind of the context of the response, because it does get a response. So, this is what Paul says. So verse 21, I'm going to halfway through what he says, but you'll get the gist. "That is why some Jews seized me in the temple courts and tried to kill me. But God has helped me to this very day. So I stand here and testify to small and great alike. I'm saying nothing beyond what the prophets and Moses said would happen, that the Messiah would suffer and, as the first to rise from the dead, would bring the message of light to his own people and to the Gentiles." At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. "You are out of your mind, Paul," he said. He shouted. "Your great learning is driving you insane." "I'm not insane, most excellent Festus," Paul replied. "What I'm saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I'm convinced that none of this has escaped his notice because it was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do." Then Agrippa said to Paul, "Do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian?" Paul replied, "Short time or long, I pray to God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains." The king rose, and with him the governor and Bernice, and those sitting with them. After they left the room, they began saying to one another, "This man is not doing anything that deserves death or imprisonment." Agrippa said to Festus, "This man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar." Paul shares his testimony. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we've got the lights, because of what Paul says. His job, he understood that God had given him the job, and what Jesus was all about was that the message of Jesus, that he rose again, the light of his gospel would travel the world. That's why we're using lights, to see how light has shaped. First to the Jews, as we said with the kind of white lights, first to the Jews, and then to the Gentiles, the multicolored lights. That's what Paul says. He presents the gospel. He presents his witness, his testimony, and the gospel. And Festus goes, "You're insane. You are crazy." I want to tell you that I have had really good friends of mine, who have ridiculed me for believing in Jesus. Really good friends that I went to school with when I was in year 10, year 11, year 12, where I'd known them for a while, and they knew I was a Christian. They knew I believed in Jesus, or at least they should have. I never shied away from what I did on Sundays or Fridays or anything like that. And I was sitting with them, and he was asking some questions. So he was putting me on trial, basically. He was asking me questions. He wasn't aggressive, but he was asking me questions, and I was just responding to them, telling him about Jesus and what I believed. And he thought I was nuts. He thought I was crazy. Now, the benefit I had was that there were two other mates who were sitting there with us. So there's four of us sitting there. There was him, who's clearly not going to believe. He really wasn't keen. He was trying to trap me. And there was two others who were just hearing what I was saying. So it was good. They actually got to hear the gospel. Now, we've got to take that opportunity to share the gospel. I said a couple of weeks ago, or you would have heard a couple of weeks ago, we need to take those opportunities, even when they're kind of aggressive, or even when people aren't friendly with us or whatever. We need to share the gospel with them. We need to tell them the good news of Jesus. Now, we get a response here. Now, we have seen mixed responses. Obviously, we've seen the light spread, so we've seen positive responses, but we have seen as well people who've been really angry with Paul. We've seen how people have responded to the gospel, and it hasn't been, "I accept this and this is good." It is, "This is bad and I've got to get rid of you." It is, so counter to who they are and who they want to be. They want to do whatever they want to do. They don't want to have to kind of listen to God. They want to keep living a life of putting others down or taking advantage of others. They don't want to be followers of Jesus and actually show love and concern for people. And so there's that response. And Festus goes, "You're insane." People will hear us share the gospel with them. People will hear us tell them about Jesus. People will hear us tell them about what Jesus has done in our lives, who Jesus is to us, and they'll go, "You're insane. You're a lunatic." They said it to Paul. I mean, Paul was one of the best missionaries, if not the best missionary the world's ever seen. Think of all the lights that I've turned on in all the different places because of Paul and the group. It wasn't just Paul, there was Barnabas as well, and Silas and Timothy and Mark. There were others that travelled with him, but think of all the success Paul had in all the different places. And he still had people go, "You're insane." King Agrippa was like, "What, you plan on making me a Christian? What are you doing?" I mean, to be fair, he said, "I want to hear your story, basically. I want to hear what's going on." Paul told him, and Agrippa's like, "Well, hang on, are you trying to make me a Christian?" Paul's like, "Exactly. That is exactly what I'm trying to do. You told me, tell me about Jesus and what you're doing, and so I did. And I'm hoping that you become a Christian." Now, it's a bit of sarcasm or wit in this, where he's like, "I hope everyone here is like me, except for the chains." That's a funny thing to say when you're on trial, isn't it? Like I want everyone here to be exactly like me, a Christian, just without chains if possible. Paul keeps his humour and stuff, but he wants people to know Jesus. We've got to make sure that we take that opportunity to share Jesus. I think when we look at chapter 26, again, encourage you to read it. When we look at chapter 26, what we can see is Paul's desire, and it's a good desire, and it's what we should all have, for people to know Jesus, to tell them the gospel and for them to know who Jesus is. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you believe in Jesus, if he's been important for your life, then we've got to be sharing him with people. We cannot go through our lives. The worst thing would be if we got to 80 or 90 or whatever, and we hopefully get older, whatever it is. But at our funerals, I know that none of us like to think of funerals when we're young, but at our funerals, it'd be terrible if someone stood up and from a church or whatever and said, "Oh, they're a committed Christian," and we had a whole group of friends go, "Really? I didn't know." People should know we're followers of Jesus. People should hear about Jesus from us. Some of them are going to think we're crazy. But the hope is that when we're telling people about Jesus, others that are hearing it as well, and they might respond. They might hear the good news of Jesus and respond. This week or over the next couple of days, maybe look out for chances where people are asking, people are seeking, people are wanting to know. Look out for those times where you can share with them. Maybe it's inviting them along to church, inviting them to kids' church, inviting them along to a youth group, something that they can come to and see who Jesus is in a whole bunch of different people's lives, including your own. Have a good week.